Okay, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, good to be here.
So, you know how this works. You send us source material, could be articles, research reports you've found.
And our job is to really get into it, pull out the most interesting parts, the key takeaways.
Exactly. We do the digging so you get the insights, the kind of aha moments without needing to read the whole thing yourself.
Cut through the noise, find the patterns.
Right. And today, well, today we're diving into something that sounds maybe incredibly specific.
Maybe even a bit tiny.
Yeah, tiny. We're exploring the global market for microgranules.
Specifically, the ones formulated for ant control.
This is all based on a pretty detailed market analysis and forecast someone shared, looking all the way out to 2033.
That's the one.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Ant control granules. Seriously, like how big can that market possibly be?
But that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right?
It really is. This source, it actually reveals how even these seemingly niche markets are, well, part of these huge global economies.
And driven by forces much bigger than just, ants in the backyard.
So our mission today, let's unpack this report. We want to understand the, frankly, surprising size of this market.
See how it's projected to grow, pinpoint where the real growth hotspots are globally.
And crucially, understand the reasons the source gives for all this. Why is this market growing?
It might seem like a quiet industry, but believe me, the numbers tell a pretty loud story.
Okay, let's dig in then. The report gives us the big picture first. So globally, what are we talking about in terms of market size for these ant granules?
Right. So according to their analysis, back in 2021, the global market was valued at, well, $103 million.
$103 million. Wow. Okay. For tiny ant pellets, I'm already hooked. And where's it predicted to go?
The forecast suggests some pretty strong sustained growth. It's projected to almost double, actually.
Double.
Yeah, reaching about $207.2 million by the year 2033.
Doubling in, what, just over a decade? That must mean a pretty healthy compound annual growth rate, the CAGR.
It does, yeah. The report calculates the global CAGR over that forecast period at 6%.
6%.
Yeah.
That's quite robust, isn't it? For any market, really, let alone something this specific.
Absolutely. Consistent growth.
Okay, 6% global CAGR for ant granules. Fascinating. Now, the report digs into regions, right? Is this 6% growth happening everywhere, or are there, like, standout areas?
Yeah, this is where you see the variations. It gets interesting. Growth is projected pretty much everywhere, but the pace is quite different.
Okay.
Take North America. It's a huge chunk of the market already, $40.7 million back in 2021.
Right.
And it's expected to grow to $74.6 million by 2033.
So a big base. But how's its growth rate? Does it match that global 6%?
Not quite. Its TAGR is forecast at 5.1%, so still solid growth.
But a bit slower than the world average.
Exactly. Big market, but not the fastest growing one.
And within North America, does the source break it down further, like U.S. versus Canada versus Mexico?
It does give some country specifics. The U.S. is the biggest player, obviously, but its growth is slightly slower again, around 4.8% CAGR.
Right.
Canada's a bit quicker, 5.7%. But the real sort of outlier in North America is Mexico.
Mexico, really? What are the numbers looking like there?
Well, Mexico's market, while smaller overall, is projected to grow from $2.5 million to $5.9 million.
Okay.
And that works out to a 7.2% CAGR.
Wow, 7.2%. That's quite a bit higher than the U.S. or Canada.
It is noticeably higher.
Does the source give any clues why Mexico might be outpacing them like that?
It talks generally about, increasing demand for effective pest control, things like urbanization, maybe climate patterns changing pest behavior.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah, but it doesn't drill down into Mexico-specific reasons. However, that higher rate does suggest those general factors, or maybe local things like building trends or regulations, might be having a stronger impact there.
Interesting. It shows how these big global drivers can play out differently place to place.
Exactly. It's not just one size fits all.
Okay, let's jump over the Atlantic. Europe, how does it stack up in terms of size and growth?
Europe's also a pretty significant market. It was valued at $30.3 million in 2021 and forecast to reach $58.6 million by 2033. So decent growth there, too.
And the growth rate?
The regional CAGR for Europe is put at 5.6%.
5.6%, so a bit faster than North America overall.
Slightly faster, yeah. Closer to the global average.
And I assume we see variations within Europe, too, like Germany versus Spain.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The big economies, UK, Germany, France, they show pretty steady growth rates, generally sort of in the 4.5% to 5% CAGR range.
Okay, solid.
But the report really flags one European country for particularly strong growth, and that's Spain.
Spain. Okay, what's the story there?
Spain's market started smaller, about $1.7 million in 2021,
Hmm.
but it's projected to more than double, hitting $4.2 million by 2033. And that means a CDGR of 7.7%.
7.7%. That's even higher than Mexico's rate.
It is. It's a real hotspot identified in the report for Europe.
Any insights from the source on why Spain's growth is so strong? Is it similar factors?
Again, it links back to those broader trends, urbanization, definitely, increasing awareness around hygiene and potentially climate factors, influencing ant populations or behavior,
Right.
Spain's climate, plus its quite dense urban centers. It could just be that those factors are combining to create a higher demand for effective controls like these microgranules.
Makes sense. Environmental shifts, societal change.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Effective controls like these microgranules.
Makes sense. Environmental shifts, societal changes, boosting a market you wouldn't necessarily think of.
That's a great example, yeah.
Okay, so Spain's a key one to watch in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, moving east, the report mentioned Asia-Pacific as a major global growth engine, right?
It did, yes. Asia-Pacific is definitely pegged as the fastest growing region overall.
What did the numbers show there?
So it started as a $24.1 million market in 2021. The forecast takes it up to $57.1 million by 2033.
Okay, substantial growth. And the regional CGR?
That comes out at a strong 7.4%.
7.4%. Wow, okay, that's clearly outpacing North America and Europe.
Significantly, yeah.
Which countries are driving that? Is it China? India?
China's a huge factor, definitely. Its growth is pegged at 7.9% CAGR, so very strong.
Right.
But the real standout, not just in Asia-Pacific, but actually in the entire report, is India.
India. Okay, what's its growth rate?
India's market is projected to grow from $2.9 million in 2021 up to $7.9 million by 2033.
And the CAGR?
Get this. 8.7%.
8.7%. That's a remarkable growth, highest in the report.
By quite a margin, yeah. Highest TAGR mentioned anywhere.
That really underlines things, doesn't it? How factors like rapid urbanization, changing lifestyles, maybe rising incomes in places like India are just creating this huge surge in demand for, for things like effective pest control.
Precisely. And you see strong growth elsewhere in the region, too, like South Korea at 6.9%, Southeast Asia as a whole at 7.6%.
So the demand across Asia-Pacific is just escalating fast.
Very clearly tied to those big demographic and developmental shifts happening there.
Okay, so just to recap the hotspots, we've got Mexico at 7.2%, Spain hitting 7.7%, and then India leading the charge globally at a staggering 8.7% CAGR.
Those are the key growth leaders identified, yeah.
And the source ties this overall global growth back to a few core drivers, doesn't it?
Yes, it kind of boils it down. Fundamentally, it's increasing demand for effective pest control solutions, both residential and commercial spaces.
But it connects that demand to bigger things.
Right. It links it to a growing global focus on hygiene standards, for one.
Okay.
Also, the challenges of managing pests in cities that are getting denser and denser. The report actually uses the phrase smart urban pest management.
Interesting term.
And thirdly, a noticeable shift towards formulations that are perceived as more environmentally conscious, eco-friendly options.
Oh, so that makes products like these microgranules, which can be quite targeted, potentially more appealing.
Exactly. These broad trends, hygiene, city living, environmental awareness, they all kind of funnel down to make specific, effective solutions like these granules more sought after.
That's the key link, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just, I don't like ants.
Mm-hmm.
It plugs into public health concerns, the practicalities of urban life, and how consumer preferences are changing.
Right. These tiny granules are caught up in some major global currents.
These underlying factors are creating this sustained growing need.
That's the picture the report paints, yeah.
Yeah.
A need for solutions that work well but also fit with how we live now.
Okay, so we've taken quite a journey through this data. We started seeing this global market for ant control microgranules was, a not insignificant $103 million back in 2021.
Right, and projected to more than double, hitting over $207 million by 2033.
Driven by that healthy 6% global compound annual growth rate.
But we also saw that growth isn't even. We highlighted North America and Europe as big, solid markets, but really pointed to Asia Pacific as the powerhouse for future growth, with its 7.4% regional CAGR.
Led by that incredible 8.7% rate in India. And we saw those other hotspots, Mexico at 7.2%, Spain at 7.7%.
Found growth well above their regional averages.
And the report gives us the why. This growing need for effective pest control, fueled by big trends like hygiene standards, urban challenges, and the push for greener products.
Yeah, it really shows how a product most of us, let's be honest, probably never give a second thought to,
Totally.
is actually part of this dynamic, growing global market. And it's shaped by these really powerful forces that affect how and where billions of us live.
So here's something to maybe chew on, based on everything we've just unpacked about ant granules. If this surprisingly large and growing market is being driven by things like urbanization, hygiene focus, environmental concerns, could it be that other seemingly small niche markets like this one are actually acting as like sensitive indicators
Indicators of what?
of much bigger global shifts in how we interact with our environment, how we manage our living spaces, maybe even public health priorities? What other everyday super specific products might be part of these huge growing global markets reflecting the same big trends, but just completely flying under our collective radar?
That's a really interesting thought to end on. What else is out there hiding in plain sight?
Something to mull over.
Definitely. Until next time. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Good to be here.
Today we're looking at, well, something maybe a bit unexpected. The market for ant control microgranules.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly specific, doesn't it? But the analysis we're drawing from, focusing on market trends in just this area, it actually tells a really interesting story.
Right. It's about how these, well, tiny particles are actually making quite a difference in how we manage pests, especially around homes and businesses.
So our job today really is to unpack this niche using that analysis.
Exactly. Figure out what's pushing its growth, what challenges it's bumping up against, and, where the innovation is taking it.
And apparently there were some surprising insights about how small things can have a big impact here.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Microgranules for ant control. What are we actually talking about?
Well, based on this analysis, think of them as really small engineered particles. Tiny beads almost.
Designed for easy application.
Yeah, that's key. And they're becoming more important in sort of modern pest control, especially for managing ants inside houses or in commercial buildings.
The source definitely flags it as specialized, niche even, but also evolving really quickly.
Right. And to understand that evolution, we need to look at what's driving it. What does the analysis say are the key growth factors?
Okay, well, one big one is this growing need for really targeted pest control. Pinpoint accuracy.
Makes sense. Why is that becoming more important?
Urbanization is a factor, definitely. More people living closer together. Plus, there's just a heightened focus on cleanliness, hygiene, maybe amplified post-pandemic.
Yeah.
People want precise solutions for specific spots.
Like kitchens or maybe sensitive areas in an office building.
Exactly. And microgranules fit that need because you can place them right where the ants are. You're not, spraying everywhere.
So it's localized treatment.
Oh.
Less unnecessary chemical exposure, but still effective control where you need it.
And then there's how they work. The analysis highlights their effectiveness right at the source. That seems different from, say, a spray.
It really is a key difference. Sprays often kill on contact, right? But microgranules, they often use pesticides with a delayed action.
Delayed action. How does that help?
Well, the clever part is using the ant's own behavior. Worker ants find the granule attractive, think it's food, pick it up, and then carry it back to the nest before it takes effect.
So they're taking the treatment right back into the colony, to the queen, the larvae.
Exactly. It's like a Trojan horse strategy. You're not just getting the ants you see, you're tackling the colony from the inside out.
Which I imagine means it's much better at stopping them from coming back.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Which I imagine means it's much better at stopping them from coming back.
Precisely. This systemic approach, hitting the source, means less reinfestation, offers longer-term protection. That's a big plus for, well, everyone dealing with ants.
Okay, that's a compelling driver. What's the third main force the analysis mentions? Seems tied to how people manage their homes now.
Absolutely. It points directly to the rise of DIY pest control, the whole do-it-yourself movement.
Right. More people wanting solutions they can use themselves without calling in professionals every time.
Exactly. And microgranules are generally pretty easy to handle.
How so?
You can usually just broadcast them over an area or spot treat along an ant trail. You don't typically need fancy equipment.
So it fits that DIY ethos. Accessible, manageable for the average person.
Perfectly. Okay, so those are some strong growth drivers.
But it's not all smooth sailing. The analysis also details some real challenges, some restraints on the market. What's the first big hurdle?
A really practical one. The weather. Especially outdoors.
Ah, right. These are tiny particles.
Exactly. Wind can just scatter them so you don't get even coverage. And rain. Rain can wash them away completely.
Which means you might have to reapply them often, right? Adds to the cost, makes them less reliable maybe, particularly in places like lawns or gardens.
Definitely a drawback. Then there's another significant constraint the analysis flags up. Regulations.
Okay, the rules around pesticides, that's always a complex area.
It is. The source mentions increasing scrutiny, tighter regulations on chemical pesticides in general. It even points to some specific active ingredients often used in these granules.
Like?
Things like neonicotinoids, synthetic pyrethroids. Apparently, these are facing pressure in different parts of the world.
And the impact on the market is?
Well, according to the source, it can limit which products are actually available in certain regions. Or it forces manufacturers to spend time and money reformulating, maybe even pulling products. It creates definite headwinds.
So a constantly shifting landscape for manufacturers to navigate. What's the third challenge mentioned? Something about what they don't do.
Yeah, their specificity. They're designed for ants, and they can be very good at that.
What?
But the analysis points out they usually don't control other common pests. Think cockroaches, termites, that sort of thing.
So if you've got a mix of pest problems, one microgranule product probably won't solve everything.
Pretty much. That specificity can make them less attractive if you're looking for a broad spectrum do-it-all kind of solution. Might limit how often people buy them compared to a more general insecticide.
Okay, I get it. So clear drivers, but also real hurdles. Let's look ahead. What trends does the analysis see shaping the future of this market?
Well, one really strong trend is the move towards organic and eco-friendly formulations, more natural options.
That seems to track with broader consumer trends.
Absolutely. The demand is there. People are concerned about chemicals around pets, kids, the environment generally, especially in homes and cities.
And is the industry responding, investing in this?
Seems so. The analysis mentions more R&D, more investment in things like botanical actives ingredients derived from plants, natural stuff.
So trying to find effective alternatives that are also greener, partly driven by those regulations too, I suppose.
Exactly. It addresses both consumer demand and the regulatory pressures. It's a big shift in the types of ingredients being explored.
Interesting. What else is coming down the pike?
Something quite different. Smart dispensing systems.
Smart dispensers. For ant granules, how does that work?
Yeah, picture like a device that automatically releases a set amount of the granules over a period of time.
Huh. So like set it and forget it.
Kind of. The idea, according to the source, is to get consistent coverage without needing someone to manually reapply them all the time.
More convenient, maybe more precise too?
That's the aim. Reducing waste, improving accuracy. They're apparently being developed for different scales, 2 big outdoor areas, smaller gardens. Adds a tech layer to it all.
Fascinating. Okay, one more trend mentioned in the analysis.
Yes, and it goes back to the bait itself. Ongoing work to make it more attractive to the ants.
Make it tastier, basically.
Essentially, yes. The R&D is focused on refining the formulations. The source mentions using things like specific sugar and protein combinations, or even adding pheromones.
Pheromones, to draw them in.
Exactly. Anything to increase the chances that the worker ants find the bait irresistible, pick it up, and crucially take it back to the colony.
To make sure that whole Trojan horse thing works as well as possible.
Precisely. It's all about optimizing that key step, getting the bait carried back for maximum impact.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive into the microgranules for ant control market, it shows a segment that's really driven by wanting targeted, effective solutions.
Right, solutions that work at the source, plus the convenience of DIY.
But it's also facing real challenges. Weather is a practical one. Regulations are a constant factor, and the fact that they only target ants.
Yeah, definite headwinds. But the future looks like it's moving towards greener, more sustainable ingredients.
And potentially smarter ways of applying them with these dispensing systems, plus making the baits themselves even more effective.
It really shows how, even in a very specific market like this, things are constantly changing. Consumer needs, rules, technology, they all push development.
And understanding these dynamics helps understand the kinds of pest control products that might become available to you. So that brings us to a final thought, something to mull over based on this analysis. When you consider these trends, the push for eco-friendly options, the potential of smart technology, what do you think ant control might actually look like in your own home or garden in just a few years?
And maybe, how might those changes affect how you approach dealing with pests?
Yeah.
Kind of interesting to think about.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai